Hey guys from the Thoughtful Gardener. Well, it feels like a long time since I've done a long live, but I wanted to tell you what I've been up to. I have been working very hard with a client on creating a habitat for a special butterfly endangered in our geography here in central Pennsylvania. We're super lucky to have a prairie remnant on Fort Indiantown Gap, which allows once a year people like you and me onto the base to see these very specific butterflies called a regal fritillary. They're very beautiful. They've been described as monarchs dipped in chocolate, but they require a very specific host plant, our violets, to be able to survive. The Fort Indiantown Gap staff, including entomologists and other experts on plants, have joined together with Zoo America, and they have been raising these caterpillars, which have a very specific habitat. So last summer, I saw this butterfly on a tour, and I was really excited about trying to recreate this prairie habitat in a small meadow of a client of mine. Now, this client's property is very similar characteristics of the Fort Indiantown Gap property. It's actually on the next mountain, so it's quite close by. And this property is getting ready to be placed into a conservancy. So we hope to be able to release butterflies there because they'll be able to be enjoyed by future generations, but not collected by the public, which is one of the concerns that is happening right now with the releases of these butterflies, that in public spaces, people might try to catch them. So what we are doing is we worked to specifically recreate the pollen sources that the butterflies would need, the grasses that the butterfly caterpillars would need, as well as the host plants, which are an arrowleaf violet. So this started last fall with taking the plants that are at this property and looking at what we would need to grow to be able to simulate as closely as possible the habitat that this butterfly would require. Now, what's really interesting is the butterflies lay thousands of eggs this time of year, and some of those caterpillars will hatch and actually overwinter. So it becomes really important to have warm season grasses because they become the bassinet of the future butterflies. So I was using different resources. I'm going to link those resources in the chat over the winter to understand how to recreate as closely as possible as this habitat. Also working with the growers to make sure that we had enough plants that could simulate the environment so that they would be successful if they were to release the caterpillars and butterflies on the property. So these are some of the pictures, and how did we do this? Well, first and foremost, this client had had 2 previous small meadows created for a wedding on the property of one of their children. And unfortunately, the plants that were chosen just really weren't appropriate for a long-term solution. A lot of them weren't native, so they didn't survive. This area really doesn't have access to water, so we really needed to make it where once the plants were established, they would be on their own. So we used a mixture of normal-sized plants as well as thousands of plugs, and that's what you're seeing here are all these little flags that designates where the plugs are. But the first step was really clearing the meadow, and the client is very big, as I am, on not using any kind of chemicals. This is a debate in the industry. I'm not going to get into the debate about how you clear your property, but what we decided to do is we cut it very, very low. We weed whacked everything. We removed the old grasses out of the property. The only thing that the client wanted to maintain was a butterfly bush. I know, they're invasive, so we're going to cut it down at the end of the season so the seeds don't get everywhere. But everything else is been completely replaced. Now, some extremely beautiful rocks were in one of the gardens, so I knew that the soil would be drier there. The other garden is surprisingly pretty wet. We had a pretty wet spring, so as we started to get these plants in a maturity state for the plugs, it was really interesting to start planting this property because you would run into patches of dry and wet, and we had both, knowing that we would have all different types of soil conditions that we would be dealing with. So once we cleared out all of the debris, lots of thistle pressure, lots of weed pressure, we used cardboard. Now again, some people are going to tell you this is the wrong thing to do. I'm telling you what we have done, and I've used it on other properties, so it works for us. and we used it in this particular case. So we used cardboard to overlap the meadows that we were going to plant. Obviously takes a lot of cardboard, but I have access to a lot, so that worked out well. And that pretty much smothered the majority of the weeds. The places that we missed, honestly, was where we did not have good coverage with the cardboard, where there were gaps or holes in the cardboard where the weeds were able to come up. So it did require quite a bit of hand weeding to get out those remaining thistles and more pervasive invasive plants. But we have done that, and we continue to stay on that. This is not a one and done. You're going to have to continue to deal with that because of the extensive root systems, especially of thistles, very difficult to remove. But fortunately, majority of the plants were absolutely killed underneath by leaving the cardboard on for over a month. Then what we did was all of the plants from all the different growers, and I just want to give a special shout out to Calyx Nursery, Hungry Herc Nursery, and Donna Warbowski, who grew those plants for me. The other grower is a commercial grower, but it was sold through Daikon Youth Services. And so I just want to say thank you to all of those growers who worked with me very carefully to cultivate the plants that we felt would be most applicable for being able to attract these butterflies. And so that really started out the matrix planting that we did. We tried to make it so that it would be aesthetically pretty to look at, but would resemble a meadow. Now, I should say that we have a ton of deer pressure on this property. So the very first night in putting some of the plants in, especially the quinine, we had deer visitors, and they took the heads off coneflowers and quinine. So we did put down some deer preventer so that the plants could get established. I'm really not concerned about them eating the tops off, but I am concerned about them pulling the plugs out, which is what was happening. So we did use both a granular and a spray. And that did resolve our issue. We will obviously have to reapply with the season as it goes along, as it continues to rain. One other person that I did not mention and I want to mention is Katie at Stony Creek Farms. She also grew for me as well. So what are some of the lessons learned about building meadows? Well, first and foremost, because we don't use chemicals, and that's just something that I'm very passionate about, my clients are very passionate about, that we, cardboard, you make sure that there are no gaps. And it takes a lot of cardboard, more than you could possibly ever consider. Make sure that cardboard doesn't have tape on it, make sure that it doesn't have paint on it. And what we did is would remove sections of that cardboard as we were planting plants. So the majority of the cardboard has been removed. Where we left it was around some of the larger plants just to add additional moisture, because again, we are basically hoping that this garden can be water-free after this year. So some of the larger investment plants, shrubs, we did leave the cardboard down. That will help keep the moisture. And then we used pine straw from Mid-Atlantic Pine Straw. I will leave the link. Bill is a fantastic collaborator on a lot of my projects. I love the longleaf pine. It's extremely attractive, but it also is great for planting like this meadow, because as these plants seed, that we hope that those seeds will then grow new plants in the meadow, and that way we can basically choke out those more aggressive weeds and things that might enter into the garden. So I hope this is an inspiration for you, of those that are going to be growing meadows, converting lawns for meadow. It was a really fun project to do, and I'm super grateful for the homeowner, who was an incredible help. She actually loves to work in the garden, so she was really a great set of hands to have in the garden. And it's also a really wonderful way for me to teach my clients about the plants, which I really, really love. So I'm super grateful for that. And we're actually going to do even more meadows on this property, larger meadows. So I'm excited about that, and we'll be using a seed and plug technique for that particular space, because it's significantly larger than the ones that we just did. So again, if you give this a shot, I'm going to put the books in the links. I used Indigenous Landscape Book as a guide, and pretty much everything that they had recommended to do, we did in planting this garden. I've also found a new link called All About Meadows that a follower had put up who grew a meadow in her own property. And I will make sure to if you will put Meadow in the comments down below, we'll make sure to get you a copy of it, because I think it's a really great primer on the why and the different types of meadows that you possibly could grow, which obviously we're not covering here. So if you love this content, we would really appreciate you making a comment on the channel. The challenge of the algorithm right now is it likes to see engagement. And that means you guys not just clicking like or sharing the video, but also making a comment about the video. So if you found something helpful here, learned something new, I would be very appreciative if you wouldn't mind leaving a comment down below. Hope you guys are doing well. Garden thoughtfully and take care.